Well, here we are, back in the Ironsides podcast studio. I got my good friend Adriana here. How are you?
I'm good.
Good. It's good to have you back.
I'm thrilled to be back.
Yeah, there's when I say back, like you've been here in the studio or in the gym before. We've chatted, and we've chatted in a lot of different places. I've seen you kind of in different spots and just catching up sort of personally, but also professionally. And this talk is a little bit more on the professional side with you and the things that you do as a professional now. And I'm super stoked to get into this because for people that are watching, they can see the shirt you're wearing, which says DSS on it, and the DSS shooting team. The DSS is something that I wasn't really familiar with, that I had to get caught up on through you. I was completely ignorant to it. Like I just didn't know. And in fact, I thought you might have worked for a different agency when I originally met you through the In-Extremis Performance dudes who were out actually in the Alameda locally here, because you were local. You've been stationed here locally for quite some time. And I thought you were part of attached to another group, because I showed up late to this thing and I made a huge mistake in an assumption. I'm like, wait, what is she doing? Like, where is she coming from? So welcome to the show.
Thanks. Yeah. When you say, you're a federal agent, most people think FBI, and you saw the FBI crew there,
right,
and thought I was part of them. And so it's always really fun to educate someone on the diplomatic security service, because don't feel silly that you didn't know what it was. I didn't know what it was. Most people don't know what it is. It's not one of the well-known.
We're going to get him. We're going to get him. So there's a little bug floating around in the studio right now. And just get it. Yes. Done. He's been unalived. All right. Now we can continue the show.
It's part of the training.
So yeah, diplomatic security services. It was service. Sorry.
Yes.
It was, so even still, it's slightly obscure to me.
Yes.
There's a lot of S's in that.
I know.
So it's, again, people are a little confused. It's a little obscure. They don't really know what is this? Is this like the Secret Service? Is it like the FBI? Like, the hell are you guys doing out there? I didn't really know about this. And every time I talk to you or we chat or we go back and forth, like on Instagram, I find out a little bit more. You've got a really interesting history with the department, but also, former municipal law enforcement officer who moved into the federal side of things. So again, I think what you were saying there before we were eradicating the bug in here, and that is that when you say people, or when you tell people like you're a Fed, like there's a few 3-letter agencies that kind of come up there. Yep. And so this one never comes up, I'm sure. It's never come up for me, and I know a few people and have talked to a few people, and you're the first person I ever talked to that was part of this. So.
I'm trying to change that. And I think there are a lot of people that are trying to change that now. And the organization is working more on getting the word out, because we have such a cool job. We have incredible people. We are leading the way globally, and we have a law enforcement responsibility. We're also diplomats. It's such a cool overlapping of really interesting skills and incredible opportunities that people need to be aware of this, because the next generation of agents is out there right now. And if they don't know about us, how can they apply?
Right. Yeah. And again, going back to kind of a cool story and just the things that you've done. So you've had a lot of different experiences with them, and I want to get into that a little bit. Let's just talk a little bit higher level on DSS. And I guess if we could just give a big overview statement of what the department does and how it operates, maybe we start there. So you can start and finish kind of wherever you want, if we're just trying to give people sort of a Reader's Digest version of this.
Yeah, of course. When I have to explain it to people, the first thing I start with is we are part of the U.S. Department of State. So the State Department that issues U.S. passports and allows people to register, a birth abroad if you have a child while you're outside of the United States. The same State Department that provides all of those services has a law enforcement and security branch, which is the Diplomatic Security Service. So we work within the larger Department of State, but we are mostly focused on the security and the investigations and the dignitary protection.
Okay, so there's a lot of things
that takes place all within the conduct of U.S. foreign policy. Okay,
so that is a lot. So when you think about that, I'm like, okay, well, who else does that kind of sound like? You talk about investigations and fraud, you know, that term fraud comes up and you think FBI, like bank fraud and all kinds of different types of things that go on. There's actually like one of the other kind of ones that's interesting to me, and I haven't actually ever talked to somebody from, is the people that work for the Postal Service.
Yes. The postal inspectors.
Right.
I've heard that that's a cool job because anything that touches the mail kind of becomes their jurisdiction. So they can get linked in on, they, I think, do a lot of interagency things. And sometimes that's the most interesting work, when things overlap across different jurisdictions. So
when you're talking about this and all the things that I guess can happen, so maybe I frame this as, you know, just kind of giving people, again, some perspective. And for those people listening, we're in the, we're still, the studio's in the gym. So you might hear maybe some weights clanking or some bumper plates hitting the floor outside. So that's what's going on there. That said, maybe talk a little bit about like, what are some of like the more, I don't want to say lower level, but like maybe lower risk type of things, if that's a thing. I don't even know if that's the right way to put it, but things that would happen like on a day-to-day that maybe not so exciting, you know, and because I want to move into some of the things that could be, I guess, looked at as like, whoa, that's pretty cool. I didn't know that existed. What can you tell me? Yeah,
so a lot of people ask about, like, what does your average day look like?
Yep.
And what is cool about this job is there really isn't an average day. You can kind of start to talk about what your typical duties would be in a certain post or in a certain office or role that you're in. And that helps answer the question. But honestly, what I love about the job is the fact that even within one assignment being posted here in the San Francisco field office, it's not the same from day to day.
Got it.
So your duties might include, you know, some administrative stuff. Like, this is the government, so we do have to kind of deal with paperwork and things like that. But I guess, like, if we're talking about lower threat levels,
yeah, there you go.
Then we're not talking about our most dangerous countries around the world where we have a presence. So, like, domestically, we have 33 offices in the United States. We have 8 of those are field offices in the main, like, larger cities.
Okay.
So San Francisco is one, LA, Houston, Boston, Miami, New York, Chicago, and Washington, D.C.
This makes sense. These are the major metropolitan areas where things are a little hotter.
And then you have smaller resident offices that fall underneath the larger field offices. So here in the San Francisco field office, our leadership also is responsible for the rest of the area of responsibility. Okay. Seattle has an office. They fall under us. The newest one in our AOR is Salt Lake City, also Denver. So there are offices in smaller U.S. cities as well that don't have as many agents. But all agents, when they start out, will go to one of those 8 field offices. And so, you know, you're not in the most high threat of areas, but you're still a diplomatic security agent, and your role would be more investigations and protection and not so much security management.
Okay.
So there are also overseas posts that are not high threat. One of the ones that I served at was classified as medium. So we have different levels. And then depending on the level of threat in that country, you will have a different staffing profile of how many agents there are and the size of the embassy and things
skill
like that.
Sets and things like that.
Yeah. So I guess just talking about the domestic duties, we can start right with my first tour. I joined the Diplomatic Security Service, and I was first assigned to the New York field office, NIFO. NIFO for LIFO. Okay.
Good.
So they like to call it the NIFO Mafia because it's a larger office. And then as you leave, you go off to work in other places and you see somebody and you find out that they also started in New York, and it's like,
got it.
Yeah,
right.
Nice. So you have that in common even if you weren't there at the same time. So I started in the New York field office. I was investigating cases. So I was investigating passport fraud and visa fraud. Since the U.S. Department of State issues passports, we are responsible for maintaining the legitimacy of these passports and only issuing them to U.S. citizens who are deserving of one.
Right.
So if there's somebody that is falsely claiming U.S. citizenship, or is stealing someone else's identity or assuming an identity of a person that is deceased or something, like we are going to receive those cases if they are in our area. And then we're going to investigate and hopefully prosecute them all the way through.
So how common is this?
I was surprised to find out how common it is. All of our offices have booming criminal investigations programs. So, I mean, I guess as an average citizen, you're like, who would have the audacity to swear out under penalty of, additional federal felonies that this information is true and correct? But it's actually a lot more common than you would think. It's not that difficult for people to buy false documents. You can have your information hacked or stolen out of your trash, or you lose a wallet and now you're the victim of identity theft. And people can then go on and not only try to exploit that in other ways, but to go and get a U.S. passport and assert that they should be the one that can travel on that passport. It's the strongest travel document in the world.
Right.
So
especially with that blue cover on it, right?
Yeah. So blue cover for the average tourist. As a diplomatic security service agent, then you get to travel on the black diplomatic passport, which is kind of neat. But yeah, I mean, there are many countries in the world where you don't need a visa if you're coming from the United States. There's not a lot of heightened scrutiny. We are an important partner to all these countries around the world, and they want U.S. citizens coming to their areas. So if you can't get a passport for some other reason, maybe you are a terrorist or a criminal or something like that, and you don't want to use your true identity, but you still want to travel, you may commit passport fraud in order to have a document that you can use for your purposes. So sometimes what seems like a case that's like, oh, this is just a basic passport fraud, can lead into something a lot more intricate and open up to other types of investigations that might overlap with other agencies and stuff.
I get it. So part of this is going to be your the cooperation you get from maybe other agencies, both locally as well as federally, as the fingers of this thing or the sticky web starts to kind of become discovered and needs to be unraveled. I wonder, so, okay, you mentioned that sounds like that sounds sort of extreme when you're talking about like you're a terrorist or you're wanted in another country or whatever the case is, or wanted in this country for that matter. So I think people are like, for me, are like, oh, of course, we should be investigating these people and prosecuting them to the highest level of the law, right? What about, like, who else is doing this? Like, when you get into these investigations, who else is committing this type of a fraud? Like, are there just, again, lower threat, lower level people that are just trying to get by? And I mean, do you run across that, and how frequent is that?
Yeah, there have been plenty of those. I'm trying to think of some examples that I could give. I mean, I did have a case recently that was not necessarily the passport application fraud, but it was misuse of a passport. So someone who had come to the U.S. by stowing away on a ship from, I think, Burma, borrowed a passport from a friend to go back and visit family there.
Okay.
And I wouldn't lend my passport to someone else, but this person decided to. And neither one of these people had a criminal history. It was poor decision making, but so very, very low level in terms of like a victim. No one's identity was stolen. It wasn't a mob boss trying to evade capture. So there are there are things that are not quite as involved. We investigate them. We determine what happened. The case gets closed. It ultimately, something like that may not need to be prosecuted. But the larger ones, a lot of times can overlap with the FBI or HSI. We end up, because we also investigate visa fraud, people that are coming to the U.S. by being issued a visa from a U.S. embassy or consulate in another country. They're saying, I'm going for business or tourism or something, and they allege that they have a legitimate reason to come to the United States, and then oftentimes that is not true. There's some sort of fraud or false information in that, and the visa fraud can often tie in with human trafficking.
Okay.
People are told they're going to come to the United States and they're going to work, but then once they get here, their passport is taken, and they may be living or working in very substandard conditions against their will. And sometimes the sex trade is involved, and really horrible things that people fall victim to. But we partner with other organizations to try to dismantle those things and use our global reach and the information we have access to through the visa process to ultimately determine who is in charge of this scheme and to arrest them and bring them to justice.
Okay, so that brings me to some other questions. But before I ask those, where does this turn up? Like, how do these people get caught doing this? Because are they being caught like in transit as they're trying to enter back into the country, or like, where does this turn up? Like, how do we discover this person's got a false passport?
That can come from all kinds of places. So the one that I mentioned where the guy borrowed a passport, it was the Thai authorities as he was transiting through Thailand that, they held up the passport and they were like, this doesn't look like you. And then they did some more digging. The U.S. Embassy in Bangkok sent an investigator, and they worked together with the Thai police to determine what was going on. So sometimes it's at an airport where people are being inspected and scrutinized in that way, and their documents are being checked. A lot of times it is through the passport issuance process. So when the passport is received, there are all kinds of checks that it goes through, and there are fraud prevention managers that are on the lookout for certain cues where things don't line up. And nowadays, with a lot more stuff being computerized and different databases being able to talk to each other, we are identifying fraud where someone may have been living under an incorrect identity for their entire life.
Oh, interesting.
And it just was never caught in the past because we couldn't run a search and match for that biographical information against all death records.
Gotcha.
And now all of a sudden these things are popping up, and it's a current case, even though the fraud began a really long time ago. So it can be identified in a variety of ways, or we get referrals from other agencies. They're like, hey, local police did a search warrant here, or with the FBI, they did a search warrant and they discovered a bunch of counterfeit documents and maybe equipment to make false passports. So there's a whole mess of ways that we can find out that something needs to be looked into.
So when you find this out, there's an investigation, and then ultimately the goal is to apprehend and prosecute. So there's a apprehension piece, which means a warrant needs to be written, a warrant needs to be served. So is DSS handling that entire process as well?
Yes.
So we have agents in the field that are actually serving warrants and knocking on doors, kicking in doors, if necessary, that kind of thing? Or do they farm this stuff out?
So we do serve our own warrants if it's appropriate. Now, if it's something that there's a threat analysis process that we go through, and if it's something that appears to be really dangerous, this person is a known convicted felon, known to be violent, known to have weapons, then we are going to work through our partners to make sure that this is handled in an appropriate way. And our agents may support that, but they may not be the first one in the door. Because typically it's the field office or resident office that has the case that is leading the arrest. So our agents are all fully trained on how to conduct room entry tactics, and how to do arrest techniques, and we have the authority to do all those things. But when you compare that to a local SWAT team where this group of people trains only for that,
they're serving
together,
warrants all day, several a week or several a month. Yeah.
It's really important to use the appropriate kind of intelligence analysis to determine what is the best way to execute this. But we have agents here in our San Francisco field office that are out on search warrants and out on arrest warrants. And yeah, that's something that we do. We're actual badge and gun and handcuff carrying force.
So I imagine then part of the job then there also has to be your relationship building within the region or the areas that you're in. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yes, that's huge. And that, like, you really see that when we get in more into the overseas side of things.
Okay.
But that, to me, is one of the things that I love the most about this is I really enjoy the liaison piece, having these connections and building relationships with the locals and other people and other non-law enforcement entities. That's a really important part. Having good relationships with like security related contacts. Yeah. So you probably remember when they just had APEC here, they had the big summit and lots of world leaders and representatives were here.
It was right here in San Francisco.
Yes.
Right.
Our office had a lot of involvement for like the whole year leading up to that, doing the same type of thing that they're doing actually this week in New York City for the UN General Assembly, using those liaison like skills to make sure that we can get the protective details into the areas that they need to be in, do it safely, maintain security,
cover all your bases.
Cordons, exactly. So sometimes you'll be working with other people in the private sector, public sector. That's a huge part of our job. And one thing that I take a lot of pride in is, you know, if we kind of move into the dignitary protection. Yeah, I was going to get into
this is perfect segue into the security side. Yes, please go on.
So we're still talking about kind of the main duties of a domestic agent. Right. Aside from having a caseload, that agent will also be expected to work protection. So working dignitary protection for visiting foreign dignitaries that come to the U.S. or traveling to support other details that are going on in other places, maybe the Secretary of State's detail or other things in the U.S. or abroad. So what I think is really admirable about DSS and our agents is that we can't just shut down the entire city or close down a whole block because the foreign minister of Spain is coming to have dinner here.
Okay.
So you need to be able to provide adequate security, but with the cooperation of everyone in that area. So if I can't just tell everyone, hey, your business is closed now, we're putting our motorcade here, right. I have to ask. I have to really try to build rapport and have these relationships that they might have already been pre-existing. We might have been working on them for a while, or it could be a place we've never gone to.
Right.
And when I was in my first tour as an agent in New York City, I had to work really hard at that. I was a hotels agent during the UN General Assembly. You might hear me call that UNGA, UNGA, because it's a long title. But I had 5 hotels that I was responsible for. And all these dignitaries were going to come in and they were all going to have their details. And I needed to make sure that quickly leading up to this summit, I had the security managers on speed dial and we had worked out how we were going to manage that visit. And so that I think is really impressive because we have agents around the world doing that all the time. They can't tell people what's going to happen. They can't force people to do things. And we are getting it done because we really excel in those interpersonal skills and in building relationships and maintaining relationships.
So this sounds like to me, so in my little alligator brain, it's not very big. There's not too much up there. To me, what this sounds like is like U.S. Secret Service for somebody from the State Department that would be visiting or whatever, maybe a higher level. They're going to come with their own detail, right? But if you've got somebody that's coming in from a foreign country, they might have their own personal security detail, but they're not familiar with the surroundings, and we're certainly not going to let them run amok and go out and try and build these relationships prior or whatever. And they, in terms of an advance at all, they're not going to have the bandwidth, the time, the knowledge, the connections in order to do that. So that's really where DSS comes in terms of making all that happen. How much responsibility I guess, let me make sure I ask this question right. So like, again, you mentioned like you've got some prime minister of Spain. I don't know what they call that there, but they're coming in, right? And so they have their personal protection detail that's coming in. How much of this is you guiding them and kind of telling them how it's going to go down? I don't mean telling them, but really you're telling them like, hey, this is what we've got set up. This is where we're going. This is what we're going. What do you guys need from us? For the close protection stuff, if any, you guys are handling that. But maybe you're not allowed to do that on your own because now you're in our town and we run the show here. You're in America, right? So we kind of run the show here. So we're going to step in and you've got your people, but we put our 2-point people with you or something like that. Does that sound accurate?
So, interestingly, we can do some of that kind of linking up an existing security element with other partners. That sounds something like that you would see more overseas, where the DS agent is just sort of facilitating those connections and making sure the appropriate resources are in place. But our agents who are serving domestically are actually staffing the detail. So they are in the suits with the earpieces, in the driving the motorcades, right? Walking with the protectee in protective formations. They are doing exactly what you would normally think of as Secret Service type work. When people see a bunch of black Suburbans go by and the guy in the window has the earpiece, everyone is going to look and say Secret Service. Yep. But we do the same type of job, but the difference, the distinction you can make is the Secret Service, they protect all heads of state. So you said Prime Minister of Spain or President, if it's the head of that country, the Secret Service is going to protect that person while they're in the United States.
Got it.
If it's anyone below the head of state level, then if it's the head of an unrecognized territory that's not officially seen as a country in the in the eyes of the world, then they're not going to be protected by the Secret Service. They're going to be protected by DSS. So they may protect the president of Spain and we would protect the foreign minister of Spain. So when that person comes to the US, we are actually going to handle the security planning and the close protection. We're going to have our agents like right there with the person keeping them safe.
Got it.
They might send their security person or two, but typically they're not armed and we are providing the guns and we're providing that force.
So that leads me to like a deeper level question with what level of protection is DSS able to provide similarly maybe to U.S. Secret Service when you think about this? And, is there a counter assault team? Is there a sniper team that's DSS? Is there a special advanced team beyond those two teams? Like, does it run that deep? Do we have all these types of people at DSS too?
We have most of that stuff.
Okay.
So, and you're going to lead me into other topics. This is so fun. So we can staff a detail from a very small escort where the person, it's very low likelihood of threat. And again, all of this is intelligence-based analysis. Depending on what's happening with world affairs, how known is this person? Because you could have somebody that most Americans wouldn't even recognize. And that person could walk down the street and not be targeted.
Right.
But then if you put 6 guys wearing suits around them, like now it's going to draw attention. So we kind of try to do our due diligence in figuring out what is appropriate for this person at this time, given the climate.
Right.
And then we can do these smaller, just like escort type couple agent type of details, all the way up to our high threat details, which would be somebody, the Secretary of State is always high threat. He is very well known. And so he obviously would make a very good target if somebody wanted to send a statement in a terrorist act.
Sure.
So he's always high threat. He's going to get the most resources. And then we have sort of medium and middle in there as well, where we decide what is going to be the size of this footprint. So we have the ability to put all of that. If counter snipers were necessary based on what we had analyzed, that's probably something that we're going to use our partners for.
Gotcha.
We, unfortunately, as much as I think it would be cool to be able to train as a sniper for DSS, like that's not currently something that is an agent track.
Got it.
As far as a CAT team, we can provide that in-house. We have an office within DSS called MSD, Mobile Security Deployments. I served there once, and I'm leaving on Saturday to go back for another tour there, so I can talk about that at length as well. But MSD has a lot of heightened capabilities. It consists of agents that have additional training, and so they can staff that counter-assault team that would support a detail if there was a heightened threat. So I think that answers your question.
It absolutely answers my question. I just didn't know how, to what depth and breadth for that matter, like DSS had those types of resources, training, and, how much do you have to farm out or couple with your partners. Okay. So that handles kind of, again, like the investigations that are being done and the security end of things here. What other types of domestically, because I want to move to the global stuff in a minute, but what else kind of domestically are you doing? For example, I think the last time I had you in the gym, we talked a little bit about something you were doing that day. You were going out, I think you were consulting with a local, I can't remember I know exactly where it was, but I can't remember exactly what you were doing. Can you talk about that? Yeah,
we kind of got cut off there, and I didn't get to tell you more of the details about that. The substation for PG&E, right, Pacific Gas and Electric, is located in Metcalf, which is not too far from you here in San Jose. And about 12 or less than 12 hours after the Boston Marathon bombing attack happened, there was an attack on the Metcalf substation with small arms fired, unknown how many attackers there were. But it is the closest that anyone has gotten to destabilizing the U.S. grid.
The power grid.
And this one substation would have taken out the entire western area, which I believe is 11 states. So this was, and it's wild that it was probably in the news at the time, but
people were not talking about this.
But I think it was totally overshadowed by what happened in Boston. And it was really interesting timing by the terrorist because the law enforcement resources were so strained. So that's something that would have normally been investigated by the FBI, and they would have jumped right on it and dug right in. But because everyone was running leads for Boston, including out here on the West Coast, like everybody was tapped and stressed, already stretched. So this was something that happened right here in the backyard
15 miles from here
of our domestic field office. So we had an agent that was working here. He was our liaison to the FBI Joint Terrorism Task Force. And he had the opportunity to take a tour and to hear kind of the breakdown and the briefing about Metcalf and the subsequent investigation that did happen. And he was leaving for his next assignment, but he mentioned to one of the supervisors, like, hey, this was actually really cool. And it's a thing that the FBI does for their purposes. But what these security personnel working for PG&E, like what they did and what they are doing is what DSS agents are doing at their posts overseas.
Okay.
So not only did they have to kind of manage the investigation and all the different entities, local, state, federal, that were involved, but then they had to identify areas of vulnerability and do physical security upgrades, and they noticed that certain relationships were not in place, which led to a breakdown in communication as this was happening and as it was all unfolding. So they basically took all of their lessons learned and then worked on putting those relationships in place, worked on educating police dispatchers and things to understand, like, if somebody's saying they're shooting at Metcalf, they're shooting at the substation, you want that dispatcher to immediately recognize what they're talking about and for there not to be a delay in response. So basically, the PG&E security guys were doing what we would call in DSS RSO work. So RSO stands for Regional Security Officer. And when a DSS agent is posted at a U.S. embassy or consulate overseas, that's the job they're doing. Managing security, physical security of the compound, maintaining relationships with the host nation and local law enforcement. And so we were able to arrange this tour for our agents here in the San Francisco field office to go out and do the site walkthrough and get the briefing and hear of how that all went down.
And so you were part of this kind of follow-up?
Yes, and it was really cool because the majority of our agents are in their first tour with DS. So they all they're straight out of training or up to 2 years on the job. It's a 2-year assignment, so we just have them for a short time. Mm-hmm. And this was a really unique opportunity for them to see this RSO work, like right in their backyard,
right here,
at a domestic office.
Not have to be in another country.
Exactly.
To do that.
So now when they do transfer to an assignment, and if they're going off to be the ARSO, the assistant RSO, they already kind of are starting to develop an idea of what that work is going to look like. So I thought that was a really awesome thing that agent kind of recommended. And it was cool that we were able to follow up and get them that experience.
So we've alluded to this a bunch of times, and I wanted to get there, and that's the global side of things, because you've had some experience doing that. You mentioned the MSD team. Can you just go back to the MSD team real fast and what that stands for? I don't think we covered that. Mobile.
Oh, yeah. Mobile Security Deployments.
Okay. So this is somebody that can get up and go anywhere at kind of any time across the globe in domestically as well, but can go across the globe and respond to events or high threat type stuff in like how many hours? Like if you're
12 hours, we can have a team deployed within 12 hours to any of our posts around the world.
And these are people that are kitted up, right? And ready to go do the thing.
Yes.
However they need to do it. So would this include things like hostage rescue and apprehension? And I mean, what's the parameters there of what MSD would be doing?
So to just explain the office itself, like sometimes when I'm talking about it casually with people, I'll just sort of say, oh, MSD is our tactical team. Okay. In reality, it's an office of a bunch of small teams. Okay. So each of those small teams is on a cycle. So, one will be ready to go out the door at a moment's notice, and the next one is kind of up next. And then other teams will be in a training cycle. Other teams might be down.
This sounds familiar.
Yes.
Like if you look at it like SOF, it works very similarly.
Yep.
Right? Yeah, okay.
So the training that you receive in MSD is meant to prepare you for a variety of crises. So you're in a crisis response situation, and we want to be as prepared as possible to handle any of those things you mentioned. Now, when it comes to hostage rescue, we're going to recognize that there's an actual hostage rescue team from the FBI that is what they specialize in, or maybe a military unit that specializes in training for hostage rescue scenarios would be the best person to lead on this.
Okay.
But if they're coming into another country and they're going to need support from the embassy in any way, then the MSD team can absolutely link up with them and create that partnership, because we are speaking the same language as the tactical team, but also speaking the same language as the DSS agents in the RSO office. So while we do have the tactical ability to kick in doors and do CQB and shoot and clear rooms and all of that stuff. It's also about recognizing where is the exigency. If our team needed to do that because we had a DSS protectee inside a venue and no one is coming to save them except us.
We can't wait 12 hours for Delta to get there.
So our guys might be sitting in the truck outside and they're going to be ready to break in, recover that protectee, and break out. Fight our way in and fight our way out if we have to. So a lot of it is like, if you can look at it from the idea of supporting protective operations, but doing it in potentially high threat, hazardous, and maybe like under-resourced areas, right? Semi-permissive environments or areas of civil unrest, like things where it's going to be difficult for the agents on the ground to do their job. MSD can come in with additional training and additional equipment and be ready to and maybe support or take over as needed.
I would assume like more familiarity with all the things, right? Like the area, the things that you may be dealing with, the people that are inside or whatnot, you can brief these other teams and be ready to go. So that's the collaboration there.
Right, yep.
So can you give me an example of, something that's happened in recent history where MSD got to, I don't know if you can talk about that, but something where they got deployed and maybe had a success, or I don't know when you talk about failures, but a success in some way, something that maybe the public's familiar with or not familiar with?
Yeah, so one thing that I think is pretty awesome is that obviously we want our diplomats to be safe, right? So we build these big compounds, we try to make them as impenetrable as possible. But when areas are too dangerous for existing embassy operations to continue, we will draw down or evacuate the embassy completely. But we don't want to lose our diplomatic presence in that area because in a vacuum, you don't know, that can definitely not go the way that we want.
We've seen that in spades just in the last couple of years.
We have diplomats that are chomping at the bit, like wanting to do engagement and to keep working on forward policies in these issues. So that's this kind of idea of expeditionary diplomacy.
Got it.
An area where we have to leave and we're going back into. So like MSD may help evacuate an embassy from a particular country where the civil unrest has gotten really bad. And they'll go there when things are looking like they're getting worse, assist with the evacuation. And then MSD can be the first people back on the ground, back in the area, protecting diplomats that are trying to return, to reestablish our presence in that area. So some successful missions have been MSD agents were the first agents back to Benghazi and Tripoli in Libya. We helped us evacuate Sudan. So there are certain things like that. And my team specifically, when I was there, went to Mogadishu, and there was kind of a makeshift or ad hoc compound developed within the secure airport area.
Okay.
Where we're able to get people back in and working in that area when we didn't really have like a formal embassy there anymore.
Got it. There's a lot of things there.
Yeah.
That's a lot of stuff. And again, no idea. We heard most people, I think, that read books and pay attention know about like the Benghazi stuff and how awful that whole thing was. And, what happened up to and immediately following, but we never hear about what happened after, right? And the fact that we did reestablish ourselves there in some way. When I say ourselves, I just mean the U.S. presence there. And so somebody has to do that. And who's doing that? It's not the CIA that's doing that. It's not contractors that are doing that, as the movie and the book and the story goes. It's the DSS that's doing this. That's interesting. I had no idea.
And even more recently, you have Kyiv. So the embassy in Kyiv, right, first drawing down, then evacuating. MSD is assisting in that. They had just gotten everyone out of the embassy, and they were already planning for how can we return, right? How can we, from Poland, start to move back in?
Got it.
And get everybody back in place. Like we want to be we want to be there. And even if it's dangerous, like we have to find a way to facilitate that because it's just so critically important.
So there's there's a lot of things going on here. I wonder, like, how many of there are you? Like, how big is this department?
It's not big. The State Department, right, larger State Department is quite large. Tons of people working for the State Department. I couldn't tell you the number. But in terms of diplomatic security service, we are about 2,500 personnel, not all of which are agents. I believe we have 2,000-ish or maybe just shy of 2,000 diplomatic security service agents. And then we have additional career paths as well, if people are interested. We also have security engineering officers, security technical specialists, and diplomatic couriers because we have to get important classified documents or whatever
hard drives,
around the world.
Right.
Exactly. And so you can't just hope that makes it in DHL. We have our couriers that are actually traveling with all of that stuff. So those other like 3 career tracks are not the gun carrying people with arrest powers, but they are part of DSS. And the agent cadre is bound around, or kind of our full complement, I believe, is like 2,000-ish. So it's a small organization. And usually, like if you knew a DS agent, I would probably have heard the name.
So it's, so it's a fairly small.
Or your 1 degree of separation.
Right.
I could ask somebody and they had worked with them on a detail or at a different post.
So you mentioned like the non-gun carrying, right, arrest power folks, and that's all included in this 25-ish hundred people?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep.
So in reality, it's not really that big when you think about the globe.
Yes, we have 270 posts around the world in over 170 countries. And I mentioned the 33 offices in the United States.
So that's less than 10 people a post.
It's small, yes. And again, that the staffing is going to depend on what's where your post is and what's happening at the time.
So if you're in New York, right, it's going to be I would imagine it's a fairly large post versus being in Denver, I think you said, in Colorado, which is part now of the West Coast or Western region, however you put that there, which is part of the San Francisco, which is the major office on the West Coast.
Right.
Okay, got you. Yep. All right, so not a lot of people, a lot of things going on, going back to these folks like foreign service folks that are doing all different types of things. So these are, I imagine there's like analysts that are studying political events, like gathering intelligence, passing that on to not just the DSS, but other agencies working in conjunction with places, people like the FBI, like the CIA, like the State Department at large, and passing on information. So there's a lot of different kind of entry points or things people could do within the DSS.
Yes. Yeah. We do have investigative analysts and investigative specialists and things at our field office here. We have some analysts that are really awesome and have actually solved cases for other agents. They've seen some sort of interagency be on the lookout come across in the email, and they just start going down the rabbit hole of social media and looking through things. And then it was wild. We had a working group where some of our analysts presented some of the things that they've done, and it was crazy. It was like, oh, and I saw this picture on his Facebook, and I noticed that the roof behind him had a distinctive slant to it. And then I went on Google Maps and I found something that looked similar, and they found the guy. Right. They solved somebody else's case, and there was an arrest because of the work that they did. So yeah, if that's really your thing, we do have analyst positions.
Okay, so let's talk about this. So just in terms of entry into this, how do you qualify for this, and how do you kind of choose? Do they choose for you? Like, you're going to be an agent, you're going to be an analyst. Does it go like that? Or is this like an application process, like you can kind of choose? Or are you going through like an academy, right? And then you just get assigned whatever happens after that? How does that look like?
So a lot of different questions in one.
Right.
You do decide for yourself. You would apply to each of these different positions separately.
Okay.
So if you want to be an agent, They wouldn't say, oh no, we're putting you in an analyst position. Like that's not going to happen. Either you're hired as an agent or you're not.
Got it.
Now, if you're looking to get your foot in the door and you don't have any background or experience, and you're interested in being an agent, but maybe also apply for the analyst position. You can learn a lot about the organization. You can develop your skills, intelligence and your investigative skills, right? And then that will make you a stronger applicant for the special agent. So you can apply to them distinctly from one another. There is an academy. We ultimately go through about 8 months of training. The first you have an orientation within the State Department where you're grouped up with the Foreign Service officers.
Okay.
So that's a whole separate set of personnel that we haven't mentioned yet today. A diplomatic security special agent is known as a Foreign Service specialist. We're working in the Foreign Service, but we have a specialty and it's security. Mm-hmm. So there are other types of Foreign Service specialists. There are med specialists. If you're a doctor, you might be the medical officer at an embassy in some country. There are office management specialists and things that do more of an administrative function. So you have all these different Foreign Service specialists, and we are one type. Then you also have Foreign Service generalists, and those are what people think of when they typically think of the word diplomat.
Okay.
The FSO is not a specialist. They're not really honed in on one area.
Okay.
They're a generalist. They should be able to work in any of the 5 cones that they have, and they have to switch from one cone to another. So you can have one that is really kind of your primary. So there's like political, economic, public diplomacy, consular, and management.
Okay.
So those are the typical diplomats, the non-gun carrying folks, and they're working on a variety of U.S. policy goals, right? A lot of reporting, meeting with foreign entities, and working on what the U.S. is trying to accomplish in our relations with other countries. So you have the Foreign Service specialists and the Foreign Service generalists, and you have the DS agents as a specialist working to keep all of these people safe while they're doing their job around the world. Which kind of leads us, I got a little off track on the training. We
said
do
8 months.
Yeah, so like the first part of the first month is alongside the generalists, right? We need to understand what they do and they need to understand what we do. Mm-hmm. And you're very likely going to bump into these people out at your other assignments. So they do that part together, this initial orientation of the State Department. And then all the DSS special agent candidates will go down to the Federal Law Enforcement Training Center, FLETC, in Georgia, and complete the Criminal Investigator Training Program. So there you'll have all your DSS agents and maybe agents from other federal agencies in your same class. So you are getting kind of blessed off on by the federal government to be an investigator. And then after 3 to 4 months of that, then you'll go to the Diplomatic Security Training Center, which is the Foreign Affairs Security Training Center, FASC. And we didn't used to have this. In the past, when I went through, we would go to a bunch of different venues to accomplish our training. Okay. Now we have our own training center.
Centralized. Yeah.
Yes. So we have our own training center, and the next 4 months will be DSS specific training. You're going to learn how to do passport fraud because you learned how to do general investigations, but you didn't learn anything about passports and visas. So now you're going to learn that. You're going to learn how to do protective details, and we include all of the components that go into that. So we have crazy racetracks for doing driving, motorcade operations. We have Mout Town, for small unit tactics and stuff like that. TAC mazes, live fire shoot house, shooting range. So all of that we can do kind of with our own instructors in one place And that has really expanded our training capabilities.
So the way I understand it, and just talking to you, is that actually DSS gets quite a bit of training.
So much training.
Compared to, I mean, can you make a comparison? I mean, I know this is your wheelhouse, but can you make a compare and contrast?
I don't know too much about other agencies' training. I mean, I think my police department training was maybe 4 months total in the academy,
before you're FTO'd. Yeah.
Yes, and I think other agencies, theirs may not be as long, but our training is exceptional. So we have all of that right in-house. And then we also have an add-on training. We have a high threat training course. So if you're going to be posted to Baghdad or going to be posted to a place that is particularly dangerous, you're going to get an additional 3 months of training, which focuses on kind of now how to accomplish all these skills in that
Wherever
environment, right? So instead of just motorcade operations on the track, maybe now you're doing off-road and unimproved driving,
oh, cool.
Off-road recovery type of
fun.
stuff. I mean, I've rolled cars over and flipped them back and, you know, all kinds of fun stuff like that. And then kind of all of those skills are trained to an even higher level in MSD. So when I went to MSD, I had 6 more months of training, which is... it's training, but it's also kind of an assessment. Or selection process. Gotcha. Not everyone makes it through the training. Mm-hmm. So you have 6 more months of training there. So it's a lot. It is one of the things that I was really grateful for when I came to DS. Yeah.
So questions about like who these agents are, right? And the different roles that they're playing. So because let's talk about your experience here, and you've worked on the MSD team, which is pretty cool. I mean, that sounds like if you want to do cool guy shit or cool chick shit, this is the stuff you want to be doing, right? Like yes. that's what I've been thinking about. How do I do that, right? So you talked sort of about the training process, and that this is a bit of a selection. In your experience, just in terms of maybe being successful at this, what are the traits? What are the skills? What are what's the fabric that DSS is looking for to help somebody become that? Like, can you talk to that a little bit? I don't know if that's really well worded, but yeah. I think you know where I'm going.
Are we talking just to get started as an agent, or you're talking MSD
I'm jumping ahead
now?
And then I'm going to go back.
Okay.
So I'm jumping ahead because we're talking about the cool shit. Like they're rolling cars over and driving off road and
of
doing
course.
CQB and all that stuff, right?
No, absolutely. I heard about MSD at the same time I first heard about DSS. And I was like, yes, because you know me, you know my background and my story. All I wanted to do was be on the SWAT team at my police department. Mm-hmm. And it just, for 10 years, it didn't work out. And being able to come to DSS and say, I'm interested in MSD, and to bid on that assignment and to be able to go there and then prove myself.
Get a shot.
And do this work that I'm really interested in and passionate about, that has been fantastic. There was no one standing in my way and blocking that from happening. So I love the fact that I got the opportunity to do something that really just kind of lights me up. And I'm going back for a second tour there because I enjoyed it so much. It's typically a 3-year assignment, because with the 6 months of training, then a 2-year assignment would just be too short. You'd be almost done.
By the time you're in, you're out.
So 3 years, and I extended and did a 4th year. So the characteristics that I would say that would make someone successful in that office, you have to have all the attributes to be a good DS agent, right? So you have to have good interpersonal skills, verbal communications. Writing is really important for our job. We have to be able to write.
Oh, you have to be literate?
Yeah.
I'm out.
You have the talkie piece down. You can do that part. So you need to have all of that stuff already. Good judgment. But I think the part where MSD is a little bit different is now we're talking small teams. Mm-hmm. So you have to be a team player. And I think that I really thrive in that environment more so than the traditional office area. I want to be part of the team. I want to support my teammates, and to train and to come to work every day with shouldering that responsibility of their safety. I do still have that in other assignments, but it's different when you train and you travel and you eat and you sleep with this group of 5 people. That is something different, and so that's just such a powerful emotion, I guess. I don't know. Is that getting too mushy?
No, I think you either feel that or you don't.
Right.
That's kind of what I was asking, like just in terms of like characteristics or traits or skills. The skill set thing, some of it's being trained, but there has to be a drive and a passion to want to do this. And from what I'm hearing you say, there's another part to this, and that is, particularly on the MSD team, is that you're never in one place very long. So that's got to be a challenge if you want to get into this type of work, because family, pets, like owning a house, feeling like you're settled down in one place sounds almost inconceivable if I'm being honest. Like you just have to like the life on the road and the life of adventure and the not knowing where you're going to be in a month or in a week or tomorrow sometimes, and love that. Yes.
MSD is a really exaggerated version of that, because your bags are packed and you're ready for deployment and you're back in and you're back out. So you have to be on your toes for that. The other assignments within DSS, you are still a member of the Foreign Service. So you do still have to move. You can't just get to a certain city and say, I really like it here. I'm going to stay here for the rest of my career.
You go where the need is.
It's not an option. There are other jobs that you could apply to. We do have a small amount of agents that are civil service and not Foreign Service, and they stay put. So there are 3, I think we lost one. So I think there are 3, not 4 here in San Francisco. And those guys don't move. They stay here.
Okay.
But the majority of DSS agents are Foreign Service, and every 2, 3, 4 years, or 1 year if it's only like a high threat, a Baghdad type of scenario, every 1 to 4-ish years, you're moving on to someplace new. So I just had movers at my house today, packing out my apartment. And they try to make it as easy on you as they can. They provide a full service move where they come in, pack all your stuff, and then when they drop it off, they unpack everything, they put your furniture back together.
So there's some support level there.
There is definitely support, but that part is challenging because not everyone is ready to just pick up and start over in a new place. But if you're the kind of person that loves adventure and you want to meet new people and you want to experience new cultures and ideas and things like that, it is the absolute best place to be. I started in New York City. I went to MSD. Then I went and did 2 years as the assistant regional security officer in Cyprus. So I lived on a Mediterranean island for 2 years, managing the security programs at the post there. Now I'm in San Francisco, and then I'm choosing to go back to MSD because that type of work really draws me in. But yes, you have to be flexible and you have to be excited about this type of lifestyle because it is unique, and you certainly are not going to feel like you're stuck in a rut in some sort of routine.
I get that. So it's like it presents a certain level of challenges that may be very off-putting for some folks, but for others, it's like, yes, that's me. That's what I want. But then you mentioned some of the other jobs, like the civil service side of things, or and again, you also mentioned the foreign service piece, and that they're still moving around. They're moving all over. Yes. This is not specific to MSD. I just want to point that out. Yep. I asked you very specifically about that because of your experience, because that's what you've done and that's what you have the most insight on. But I think you did a good job of sort of overviewing kind of all those different departments, all the different things they do, how everybody works in conjunction with one another, and very few of them sound like they're staying put. This is a mobile job, not related to MSD, but this is it's a great way to see the world,
yes,
right, on a government dime, but you're also working really hard and you can't get too comfortable, anywhere. You enjoy it while it lasts, knowing that it's not forever.
Yep.
Yeah, I get that. Again, to me, that sounds I think if I was like coming out of college, and I assume like most federal agencies, they're a degree is necessary in order to get in, like a master's degree?
Bachelor's degree, I believe, or equivalent credits.
Okay.
Don't quote me on that. That's going to be laid out. If you go to usajobs.gov, that's where you can find the vacancy.
Yep.
One cool update that happened somewhat recently is you used to have to wait for it to open, and every year or two it would be open for a couple weeks. Now it's a rolling vacancy. So it's always open. You go online, you see if you meet the qualifications, and you put the application. You have to be a U.S. citizen. There's the college requirement, but it is now available at any time.
It's not one of those things where it's like, hey, there's a window,
Right.
It's going to be open. They take X amount of applicants. And then once it's closed, like you have to apply again when the next window opens and all that kind of stuff. Like that does exist still in other agencies,
Yep.
right? So, okay, going back to your personal experience as a law enforcement officer coming into this, like it just feels like a natural fit at some level. Like you already had a high level of training and experience, like in the field, dealing with people, carrying a gun, working in high threat, low threat situations. You've had some incidents, you've shared those with me, just kind of the things that you've had to deal with. So that's going to prep you for it. I wonder for the, just in terms of other people that are coming into this, do you find that you're surrounded by a lot of people that serve time with in the U.S. military? So, and just in terms of a transition over from what they may have been doing before, and is there a way for them to apply their specific skill sets that they may have had there in terms of that transition?
Yeah, and that's a question that comes up a lot. A lot of people, as soon as they hear a little bit about the job, they assume that you need to be prior military or prior law enforcement, which is not the case. And that's something that I think makes DSS really special, is that we have people from all different walks of life who are bringing in their own ideas, their own way of approaching things, problem solving, creativity, innovation. It's really an awesome collection of diverse individuals. You do have some that come from law enforcement, and that was an easy transition for me because the handcuffing and the investigations,
Sure.
like I had knowledge in that. But what I didn't have is like management piece. So someone that came from a business background that understands supervising employees, rating and reviewing them, performance improvement plans, how to manage the budget. Like there are all of these component skills of program management that I had no background in.
Yes.
And that's really important in overseas work.
I was just going to say that. And with all the different things that you might run into, so people are I think they silo stuff, right? Like, okay, if you're on the MSD team, you need to be a pipe hitter, and go in there. But you're working on a team of 5 people that have to put something together. I had a guy on the show once, he's a friend of mine. He's current Special Forces, and he's in a reserve unit. Actually, he got into the reserve unit. He's prior Marine Corps, then moves into the Army, and now he's in a Green Beret. He's a Green Beret, but he works for a very specific unit, and they are a conglomeration of guys that came in through the reserves, and a lot of them had prior military, and they came in. But after they went through the military, they also went out and did all kinds of stuff. And the way he described it was like he's got a doctor, like a physician on the team. They've got a VP of a major IT company actually located right here in the Silicon Valley that's on the team. There's another small business owner that's on the team. And so he was describing how important that is in terms of going into these things and having all these different experience levels in terms of the problem solving that exists, or that the process of problem solving becomes much different. And oftentimes they're going in to relieve teams, or obviously teams will come in behind them, and they're able to provide a whole different level of expertise because they have these different experiences and qualifications, I guess, and skill sets as they bring it to it. So I think that's an interesting point. It's not somebody that, got their bachelor's degree at 22, right? And then whatever the age is, and they go right into this thing and it's all they know.
Right.
That you have all these different backgrounds. And I think that's something that gets overlooked. So in terms of people transitioning from other places and other things, this is one of the other things he said was like, if you're bored doing what you're doing, like there could be an opportunity for you. Like you feel like you have like a 5th gear you can reach
Right.
for, like you could go for this, like you could totally do this. And it is really as simple as getting on, checking it out, or getting online. We'll talk about that, but getting online, checking it out, see if this looks good for you, and literally putting in an application. Like you have really nothing to lose, and there's all these different things you can do. But I'm glad you brought that up. Like just in the problem solving and particularly MSD, this team of 5, like if you are all the same, you really are limited.
While we do have people with lots of different backgrounds, we do get a lot of former military people.
Okay.
And I think the big reason why is they've heard of us. I would say we have a lot of former Marines. Because within the Marine Corps,
they protect the embassies.
They have the Marine security guards. And so you have Marine security guards that are out at the embassies. And that's one of the programs that the RSO would supervise. And so they've heard of us. And when people are getting out of the military, or maybe they're transitioning to just reserves and stuff, it's like they might be considering a law enforcement or a federal agent type of job. And they know that ours is an option. So we do have a lot of former Marines. But yes, if you are an interested applicant, you do not need to be former military or former law enforcement. Whatever background that you have is going to be something that you can bring, that you can turn into an asset. Now, you mentioned people coming right out of college. That has been pretty uncommon for us. When I got hired, I would say the average age in my class was like 32.
Okay.
Most people had advanced degrees, master's or doctorate. Someone had been to med school. Someone had been to law school. It's so competitive that having legitimate life experience and full-time work experience is really like kind of what you needed to get that push through there. And many people had lived and worked in other countries, had knowledge of other cultures and things. Foreign languages can come into play. We didn't even mention that part of our job is that you can go to language school full-time to learn the language that you're going to need to speak in post. So I don't need to speak Ukrainian to go to Ukraine. We might have if we have someone that already speaks it, they might be someone that can go there.
Right.
But I could go to school and learn it. So that's another really awesome opportunity. So you have all these people that are coming in a little bit later because they have these robust backgrounds. A cool new opportunity is the DS Clark Fellowship. So Clark with an E on the end is now like a postgraduate program where you do 2 years of an advanced degree and transition right into working as a special agent. So I highly encourage anyone that's sort of in that, age range of college type to look at that fellowship, because the opportunity to not only do your advanced studies, but to be able to transition right into a career that is extremely competitive and difficult to get in, that is just awesome. And if I had known about DSS when I was, younger,
you would have.
We have internships. Our internships are all paid now, and we have the fellowships. So if you go on careers.state.gov, you can click through and you can see all the things I mentioned today: the Foreign Service Generalist, the Specialist, internships, fellowships. So you have the ability to pursue this career at an earlier age than I think it was hard to be successful if you are at a young age and you weren't bringing some experience to the table.
I think that's so important to talk about for a couple of reasons. First off is that there can be life before the DSS, was specific to having a professional career, even like getting your degree, getting out, thinking you were going to do something for the rest of your life, whatever, and being like, I hate this, or this isn't what I thought it was going to be, or I'm just unhappy, or I think I have more to give, or whatever. And so you can enter it later versus like when I think about somebody trying to become a law enforcement officer, sort of a municipal law enforcement agency at the age of 32, I think there's some limitations there, right? And just in like, well, is the agency going to hire you with the amount of years that you have left, and or also because what is there for you to do in that particular agency that you might be, applying for or whatever. And again, they need a return on their investment, and that might not be the right thing for you. Also, like you're at this point in life, again, maybe you were in the military, you got out of the military, you got your degree, you're kind of like, not really sure what I want to do, but I still want to serve. And, I like doing cool guy shit maybe or whatever. And so there might be an opportunity there. Or look, I've learned a lot like in my previous life as in the military or law enforcement, if I'm looking to get out. I mean, right now, municipal law enforcement officers, I think, are very challenged in terms of looking at, at 32 years old. And I'm only using that because you said you thought that was about the average, right? They're looking at their careers going, man, I really don't know if I want to put in another 15 years here, another 10 years here or whatever else. Like, this is not the same job. I'm not feeling the same way about it. I'm not as passionate. I'm running into these challenges. Maybe I'm single. This traveling around, moving, getting out of the city that I'm in and checking out new stuff sounds kind of cool. I think I'm just kind of looking at it from different perspectives. I don't know that there are a lot of agencies maybe like that. And I don't know, I'm not super educated on all of this stuff, but I don't know a lot of agencies like that could give you that kind of an opportunity at that point in life. And I think that's a point in life where people are they're reevaluating things. And this gives you the opportunity to get into something that there's many, many different avenues that you could go down. And in this case, I think it's cool. I think it could be problematic, specifically when you're working on like a specialized unit or team that needs a certain amount of cohesiveness and experience, institutional knowledge and things like that, with the frequency of turnover. Like, you may be limited on the time that you can stay there. I think that could be challenging for people, at some level. But at the other angle on that is that just provides that much more opportunity for you to try different things to find the right fit.
Yes.
Which I think is really cool. Which it sounds like you were able to get right into the thing that you really wanted to do, but then that you timed out, right? You were able to extend, but you timed out. You were able to do some other stuff, gave you some experience, met some new people, built some new relationships, learned some new skills to then be able to take back to the team as you're going back to better the team.
Yes.
Right? To give back and train the newbies that you once were, kind of coming in. I think I hear a lot of one of our local police departments has a very limited time that guys can stay on the SWAT team as compared to a lot of other agencies that, I don't quote me on this. I think it's like 6 years. Okay. So and then you got to go, which is hard, right? I think that's hard, especially if you really love the job. But if you're looking for like, hey, I want some adventure. I want to go try some different things. Again, I don't want to beat this up, but that's an opportunity I hadn't really considered. Again, at a time in life, you're like, okay, I'm not a middle-aged adult, but I've had some adult time under my belt, and I recognize like whatever I'm doing is not what I want to do. Like, this doesn't sound fun to me at all. Like, this is in some cases miserable, and I see a lot of people kind of in that flux of what should I be doing next. This sounds cool.
We do still have the 37 age cutoff for like similar like other federal agencies. They want to be able to get their 20 years out of you before your federal retirement. But you did mention at one point, like if you're single, and you think you want this lifestyle, I want to point out that the Foreign Service is incredibly family friendly. So it's something that I think a lot of people, it doesn't seem intuitive, right? Like, you're moving all the time. How could you do that if you have a family?
Well, you get the benefits of the federal government looking out for you there and putting you in the places so your kids can be in the right kind of schools.
Yes.
Live in the right kind of environments and things like that. You're not just going to say, okay, now you're living in Morocco, go figure it out, right? You're getting some support there, right?
Absolutely. So when you go to an overseas post, the housing is provided through the embassy. So now you're not paying your expensive mortgage, but you're going to get a house size that is appropriate for the size of your family, right? So if you have 5 kids, you can live in another country in this huge house that fits your family of 7 or whatever. And oftentimes the US dollar on the local economy goes pretty far. So you could have an au pair or housekeeper, a chef, you could have a whole household staff that you have supporting you and your family, which, in the Bay Area, you're not going to be able to afford those things. And then you mentioned the private school. So there's usually an American school or some kind. Your kids can grow up learning other languages, being in class with like the children of ambassadors. And it's very, very supportive of families. And so if you have a spouse that's also adventurous and you're ready to kind of pick up and move from place to place, imagine the worldly knowledge and cultural experience that your children would grow up in, as opposed to only just kind of knowing that hometown. So,
right. With the added, maybe this isn't the right word, but support, but also protection of the U.S. government with the embassy nearby. And while, look, living in San Jose, California is a certain amount of risk, right? But I don't have that, right? My only thing is to call, I have to be responsible for myself, but, we call 911 and we hope that they get there in time to do stuff. But if I had a real problem, like, where do I go?
Right.
Versus, it sounds maybe a little scary, but at the same time, like, we're looking out for our own in other places of the world.
Yes. If you were to take your family to an embassy, you would have the regional security officer. One of the programs that they manage is the residential security program. So we make sure that all of the houses are equipped adequately, for the conditions there, whether that's fences or bars on the windows, alarm systems, things like that. So you have someone whose entire job it is to make sure that you keep them safe. And I was able to work with the American School in Cyprus to do a technical security upgrade. So I was able to use funds from a grant from the U.S. government to install new camera systems, DVR, PA announcements for emergencies, and to upgrade this to keep everyone's family even safer. So that's just like one of the programs that you're doing as an RSO that can be really rewarding.
Yeah, it's, again, so many things. It's super interesting to me, and just kind of understanding it. Like, maybe I missed my opportunity because I've aged out, in case you couldn't tell.
I have too. I wouldn't be able to apply now.
Right. So, okay. So a couple things, like, I know, like, today what we did was we reached out and we asked people, like, hey, if you want to, Adriana's coming on the show. Like, do you have some questions you want to ask, like, from the audience? So we got some questions. You want to go through some of those today?
Sure. So what's the best part of your job? I think it's pretty obvious that I love the travel and the adventurous nature and the training, getting to be physically active, to do the tactical type of stuff that I was interested in. That really appeals to me. So that's probably the best part. Someone did ask, what dislikes, if any, do you have regarding career development and travel? So,
honest question.
Yes. And career development, that's one that I'm wrestling with a little bit right now, because I've always kind of come in and said, like, I don't care about getting promoted, right? I want to bid on the assignments that are interesting to me, and I want to do the job that I love, and I don't really care about climbing the ladder. Now, more than 10 years in, I'm finding that if you stay at a certain level in the rank structure, you can affect change kind of within your own little sphere, and maybe among the culture of your colleagues at your office. But making large-scale organizational change, I'm not in a position where I can update policy and I can really drive the organization forward in the way that I would like to see it go. So I think that that's something to keep in mind. Like, if you're one of those people like me that says, I don't care about promotions, it's important to learn the game and understand how it works, and to do your best in playing the game so that the skills that you have and the ideas that you have can actually advance the organization.
Be expressed, right?
Yeah. And then the other dislike about travel, the person asked, it's saying goodbye.
Right.
Like, this is really
making
hard.
Friends, right?
Really hard. Everywhere I go, I establish my new tribe of people. And it's two-sided coin here, right? It's the worst part. I hate having to leave. When I was leaving Cyprus, I had two incredible jiu-jitsu coaches that were at, like, sister academies, and I trained with both of them. And I was like, oh my gosh, I have to leave Coach Pantelis and Coach Panicos. Oh, I love these guys. I don't really want to leave. I want to stay with them. And now here I am, 3 days from leaving San Francisco, and I'm like, Coach Riley, Coach Stefan, like, these guys are so incredible. I'm sad I have to leave. And that part is hard. But if I hadn't left the coaches in Cyprus, I wouldn't have the coaches in San Francisco, right? So it's like, every time that I have to go through this challenging part, it just opens doors for new people to come into my life and new blessings and opportunities. And so it's both. Like,
I love that perspective.
Yeah.
Yeah, where when one door closes, another opens kind of thing. But
someone asked what it's like on MSD and what the selection is training is like. We kind of covered that. How much are you OCONUS versus CONUS? So outside the U.S. versus in the U.S.
Okay.
A foreign service generalist, the regular diplomat, they spend most of their career overseas. They'll go from post to post to post, some Washington, D.C. stuff. But a diplomatic security agent should expect to be more like 50-50.
Okay.
We're going to start domestic, and then you have the ability to come back and intersperse some domestic in between.
Okay.
So that's kind of about like in your career, it washes out to be like about half. You do need to go overseas. You can't be more than 8 years consecutive domestic. That's like a congressional mandate. Like, we're foreign service. Can't just stay in the U.S.
You got to go do time.
Got to go out, reset your clock. But I didn't even mention there are some other really cool opportunities, not just as an RSO, but you could be in Germany as the DSS liaison to AFRICOM or something. You could be an overseas criminal investigator at an embassy that might have high fraud. And instead of working in the RSO office with the other agents, you're working in the consular office where they're processing the visas, and you're looking to spot fraud at the source there and investigate those things. So there are lots of different types of work to do overseas, even though we mostly just focused on the typical
But you're going overseas.
RSO.
Yeah, you're going overseas. You're not stuck in some office in some podunk town for your entire career.
Definitely not.
Unless maybe you piss somebody off or what.
Someone said, where do I apply?
Yep.
I already mentioned we have the website careers.state.gov. The actual application is found on usajobs.gov. So you can go and take a look at both of those websites, read the vacancy very thoroughly, and then you can start the hiring process there. Someone asked, do they have agents who focus on tech services and digital forensics? I will say that there are certain offices that you might have to learn a little bit more in terms of technical skill sets, but for the majority, the technical stuff, the digital stuff is going to be handled by our other colleagues, the STS, Security Technical Specialists, and Security Engineering Officers. So it's kind of like if you're more into the tech stuff, those might be a career track for you. Someone asked, how did you become so badass? So you have to listen to my origin story.
Right.
We're not going through all of that today, but what's really interesting to me is this is one of our female agents who is shooting her first 2-gun match this weekend.
Nice.
So my colleague and I developed the DS women's shooting team, and we're using it as a way to develop our agents in terms of skills and confidence in that area and have fun doing it, right? That. So you and I have spoken a lot about this initiative.
The practical shooting thing is fun, right? It helps you with the skills that help you be prepared for your job. It's kind of the practice and in the event that you might have to get into the big game, but there's a camaraderie piece. But the thing that really stands out for me on this is that it's a recruiting tool, at some level for DS. Like you're out there, you're representing, people are going to be talking to you anyway, because you're not afraid to talk to anybody, right? And you're going to always be promoting the thing. And just what a great, showpiece and mouthpiece for that, like somebody that is competitive and is doing a great job doing that, but also what is DSS shooting team? Boom.
Absolutely.
Like that's your in, right? That's your in to recruit.
The jersey has been amazing. Sometimes people would notice my gear. My belt was very obviously like law enforcement, and they would ask, what do I do?
Right.
DSS, what is that? And we would start the conversation. We're jumping straight into DSS, what is it and how can I apply? Because we have the jersey now and everybody is very interested. And one experience I had that was really cool was my colleague here and I had just shown up to a match. It was her first match. And we were getting ready and, getting her magazines loaded. And there was this older gentleman that had a young girl with him. And he was like, look, do you see their shirts? It says Diplomatic Security Service. She's going to be a diplomat when she grows up.
Oh,
and
nice.
we were like, wow, that's so cool.
Right.
And I said, you could be a diplomat and do what we do.
Right.
And shoot and, the security piece. So, this girl was like 8 years old and totally different timeline in terms of learning about this amazing career. So maybe this young lady will grow up with the goal of being a DSS agent. And the shooting team has been awesome. Not only are we out there, we're more visible, people can interact with us, they can learn all of this like right there between stages, and younger kids can see us. But one of our ladies, we have the one doing her first 2-gun match, and another one just reported that she just shot her highest qualification score ever after she started getting involved with the team and going out and testing herself
are we surprised?
on matches.
Are we surprised by this?
Not at all,
Right,
but
right.
I am so excited.
Yeah, that's awesome. So you and I have had this conversation before about how important this is. And, we hear a lot in law enforcement in general, just complaining, griping about, the new candidates, the new agents, the new officers are just not the same, whatever the case. Like, it's just kind of, it's part of the thing. But I also I've heard if you don't like what you're getting, what are you doing to change it? Like internally. Yes. And you can have influence. You were mentioning the promotion piece and what you can affect change and where you can affect change. But I don't know where more agencies are doing this. I think the DSS should have a BJJ team and they should have GIs, right?
I've said that too. I'm ready to put the same design on a rash guard and have a DSS grappling team, because we could certainly use more of our agents training that, but we have quite a lot and we have some high level black belts. And I think we should be out there dominating on the mats and showing off our organization and how skilled we are.
Why not?
That's my next step, Scott.
I think it's an excellent idea. With all the different types of competition where people might exist that would be great candidates for this job, maybe more on the tactical law and let's call it law enforcement side of things, the gun carrying side of things. What better place to be than to maybe be around people that are thinking that way anyway, that didn't even know it existed. Right. I think I commend you for this, because I know this was sort of birthed here locally by you, and you're a couple of your colleagues that are in other offices, and you guys are putting it together. I think that's amazing, and I think any agency could be doing this. You just got to want to do it, and somebody has to champion the thing. And that's the thing I love about you, is you're constantly championing all the things that you do, whether that's the practical shooting, whether that's the jiu-jitsu, whether that's the CrossFit, whether that's the agency in and of itself and what you're doing there, and you're excited about it. And I know there's other folks out there in agencies that are excited about it and prideful like you are, which is awesome. And you should have those people, these agencies should have those people out there because it can be fun. It doesn't just have to be work all the time. The better thing about it is all the things you do can be directly applied to the job. And that's the other thing I really like about you. That was how I first met you, was you getting yourself into a training which was all about improving human performance, which we just talked about with the BJJ and the CrossFit, that you do and that you're passionate about, but also the shooting end and bringing that all together. I think it's so cool. And I mean that, I'm not just saying that. I'm why don't we see more of this out there? And the question can only be answered by the people that are on the inside. Mm-hmm. With that, just kind of, you covered so much stuff. And I think, for as a representative, of DSS, what better person than to put in front of people to kind of give the overview with not too much information, just enough, gives the overview. Obviously, there's a lot of rabbit holes you could dive down into in terms of what all these positions, what all these different types of job duties could be and what you could do. And I'm happy to be sort of a platform to be out there. So before we kind of sign off here, and I just one more time, if people want to find out more, where they go, how they find out more about this thing, about DSS, any of the things.
Yes.
Where do they go?
So social media now, we have a presence on social media. If you're on Instagram, I love Instagram. It's at State Department DSS, but department is abbreviated. So state, DEPT, DSS.
Great.
So you can follow the Instagram. Right now they're posting a lot of stuff about the UN General Assembly, the work our agents are doing there. Again, we have the website careers.state.gov where you can go to find out about all the different job opportunities and different career tracks. And then if you are interested in applying and you are unsure about the process, you have questions, they are shockingly responsive. Like when I was going through this, it was just sort of like you put your application out there and then you just wait, right? And then you hear something and they say, send us your transcripts, and then you just wait. So now you can email, everyone can take a note of this, DSScareers@state.gov, and you can ask questions. If you're uncertain about a certain thing in the application process or how to do something, they would rather hear from you and answer your questions so that you can do that part correctly. They do not want to see your application get rejected over something stupid, right? Like something like you checked the wrong box or you didn't do something right. So the recruiting office, they want to support people very interested in helping. So DSScareers@state.gov. Follow the social media, and there are a lot of agents that are out there ready to answer your questions. The Instagram will often feature agents from different posts. So they're like, hey, come do a day in the life with me as the RSO in Tashkent, Uzbekistan. So it's really interesting stuff, some interesting stories. You could have a different DSS agent in this chair every day for the next week.
And hear all kinds of
And it would not be the same because everyone is choosing their own adventure depending on which places they go to and which roles they fill. So my experience is just unique to me. And there's so much more that you could hear from other people and that you can experience and explore for yourself. So the other thing I just wanted to say is, for all of my agents that might be listening to this, get out there on the range, go out and try a competition, and we would love to have you representing the DSS shooting team and get you a jersey, and we can help you climb the leaderboard.
I love that. I always enjoy hearing about your adventures, and I appreciate you sharing them, publicly. I'm glad we were able to do this today. And so, I mean, you heard it straight from the horse's mouth from somebody on the inside. If you need a little bit more adventure in the choose your own part, check it out. Again, thanks so much for your time. Thanks for hanging out with me as per usual. It's been a good time.
I love being here, Scott. You're great. You're always great. And I like listening to everything that you put out. And I hope that this meets the standards of all your listeners.
I'm sure it will. I appreciate you.
Okay, thanks.